Hello. This is a very impromptu and completely unprofessional review of a new pen that I got this week. It is a Sailor Pro Gear, so it came in this box. It's nice enough, nothing crazy. Inside, satin, I think, some cloth underneath, and you have the pen here, wrapped in plastic, but, I took that away. Instruction manuals here. Cartridges, there were two, but I put one inside the pen because, it's black. I was going to use black ink in it anyway because it's supposed to be for school, as well as a Sailor proprietary converter, which I'm not going to use until I finish the two cartridges because, why not? So, here is the pen. Now, just let's talk about appearance first. So it is a black pen with gold trim. I have a lot of black pens with gold trim. For example, this 1911 light here. And there's a lot more. There's Parker IM, for example, and Waterman Expert. So I have a lot of black pens, and there's a reason I have them, because I like them. They're kind of understated, subtle, doesn't draw too much attention, and they're classic. I personally feel you can't really go wrong with a black pen. Now that of course means that black pens can be boring, and I do agree with that. I mean, you're not really gonna get much enjoyment appearance-wise out of this pen. It's just a boring pen, but that's the point for me, because a pen for school, personally, I feel like shouldn't attract too much attention, and it should not distract you from what you're doing, and this pen definitely doesn't do that. When I hold it in my hand, you know, it becomes almost a part of you because of how understated it is, and you can just do work with it, and you won't really end up staring at the cosmos inside because, some of the pens that uh, are on the market today, they do look very, very, very immaculate, and I could look at them for hours. But this isn't one of them. And if you bring this out in school, people might look at you at first because who still uses a fountain pen in 2023, but after a few moments, they will just forget that you were ever using a pen like this because this is a very normal looking pen for all intents and purposes. Okay, so putting that aside, I like the clip. It's the step clip, but personally, it's a bit stiff for me. I much more prefer the clip on the 1911 Lite, which is the same as the 1911S, except, lighter. So, I like the clip, but it doesn't really matter if it's stiffer. I don't use a clip anyways, because who still clips pens to their shirt nowadays? I mean, come on, it's not the 1900s anymore, but the clip's fine. There's a nice little ring here, cap, I forgot what it's called, but yeah, it looks good. It's stamped with a Sailor Japan, founded 1911. It's good quality. It looks good, premium. A little ring around the end finial here. Nothing special at the end, just coating, just plastic. And in the front, the finial here, you have a nice little finial. You have a nice little Sailor badge. It looks good. It looks aged. It looks classic. And there's texture if you run your finger on it. That I like that. Very understated. And it takes 2 turns to uncap, so about 2 turns. And you see, that's pretty much 2 turns. Let's not debate about that. And there's the nib. It is a silver on gold, two-tone, 1911 21 karat gold nib. With the Pro Gears, you're getting 21 karat unless you're buying the slim. But I don't know why you would do that. So, it's nice, good nib. I'll talk about the nib in detail later. Nice section. The threads are nice and subdued, I guess. So if you put your finger around here, they feel just fine if you rest your finger on them. In fact, they provide kind of like friction for your finger, so it's actually better for me to rest my hand on them. For long writing sessions, I find this pen to be particularly comfortable because it's girthy. Oh, I forgot to mention, if you don't like black and gold, you could go on Goulet pens. They sell all kinds of special editions, and they look amazing. I mean, they look great. It's just, I wouldn't pay the extra money just for a different looking body, but that's just me. I'm not using this pen for anything but school, so. Anyway, it is a cartridge converter, obviously. I don't really mind that. The ink capacity isn't amazing, but it's not horrible either. Compared to a custom 74, this is terrible, but compared to other pens, it's alright, you know, it's not too bad. And the cap inside, I mean, you can't see because the lighting's terrible, but it's 2 a.m. I'm just bored, so I don't really care. But there's a ring inside. There's a protective layer to stop the pen from drying out. So it's a great pen. Now, for weight, it's not very heavy at all. It's actually pretty light because it's full plastic except for a few rings and such. So I would compare it to the weight of a TWSBI VAC 700R, with the VAC 700R being quite a bit, well, not quite a bit, but just being heavier. It's actually pretty much the same weight as the 1911 Lite, but also only a little bit heavier than this. I understand that tells you nothing about the weight, but I'm sorry I don't have a scale, so you'll just have to imagine. And the length, I can tell you, it's very, well, it's not very short, but it's short. It's not, if you're buying this and you're expecting a huge pen like a Montblanc or like a Pelikan M1000, you're not getting that. This is just a workhorse pen. That's why I filled it up with black ink. It's quite a short pen, comparing it to a Kaweco Sport, capped, which, you know, for a pocket pen, it still isn't very long. You can see a posted Kaweco Sport is about the same length as an unposted Sailor Pro Gear, just being a bit longer than it, which, you know, it's not a very long pen. I'm fine with that though, because it's just the right hand, it's just the right length for me when I post it. So, I don't have very big hands, so I guess if you have big hands, this isn't the pen for you, perhaps. So I'm not going to do a writing sample because I can't be bothered to set up the camera, but you can see for yourself. There is definitely a good amount of line variation on that nib. Not insane, but there is a good amount, and there's feathering because the paper is bad. Don't worry, it's not the pen or the ink. But yeah, there is definitely some line variation. There's a bit of flex to be had. Railroads a little bit, but normally the feed keeps up very well. And the nib is very bouncy as it writes. So for Sailor pens, you know, I'm sure you guys know, the pen has a kind of the feeling of a sharpened pencil when you write with it. I would more describe it as writing on silk, so it's kind of a smooth feeling, but the feedback is definitely there. And on the 21 karat nib, there is definitely a lot of, well, not a lot of bounce, but there is bounce to be had. There is not an insane amount of bounce, so don't expect the nib to be something like a flex nib, definitely not. But it is going to be on the standard of normal 14K, 18K gold nibs. But, you know, 21 karat doesn't mean it's going to be just soft to the point where it's malleable. It's not. And this nib, I believe, is one of Sailor's bigger nibs. Not their biggest, that's for the King of Pens, but it is a big enough nib. Let's do a little comparison here with the TWSBI VAC 700R nib. And, you know, it's smaller, but not by too much. So it's a pretty big nib. Let's compare it with the 1911 L, which just takes a standard 1911 S nib. 14 karat, and you can see it's definitely bigger. So it's not a small nib by any means, and even if it was one, that doesn't affect the quality of the pen. It just means it has a smaller nib. It's down to personal preference. But I find that I can have very long writing sessions with this pen, and it's comfortable to hold, and it's comfortable to write with, and it gives you a bit of that flair when you're writing long essays and stuff like that, and that keeps you going instead of procrastinating. So, personally, this is my everyday carry workhorse pen. That's it. Good night. Ciao.